Let's actually talk about Green Lantern. I got to ask you about Green
Yeah,
Lantern. Right?
yeah.
Firstly, just kind of how did you end up on that book?
The Wonder Woman stuff went so well. Brave and the Bold came off the back of that. After the Brave and the Bold, I had a bunch of options actually. And then I had been bumping into Grant at conventions randomly. We're talking about, we've got to do something. And we had some idea about maybe doing like a 40-page one-shot thing that we could create our own, but out of the blue, Dan phoned up and said, this is a bit left field, but how do you fancy doing the Green Lantern with Grant Morrison? And I was like, it's a no-brainer, man. We've been meaning to work together for ages. And then it was like working with Grant, it was like, okay, Grant's brain is so vast. He's already sort of 12 issues ahead of everybody else in his head. So anything he puts in, even if it seems extraneous, and even if it seems like it's not going anywhere or seems redundant,
it's going
to be a point to it later on. I mean, that book was crazy and wonderful, and it was sad when it came to an end. The second season was difficult because there was a lot of shifting going on at DC. We lost.
Yeah, you were in the middle of that.
Right, exactly. So we weren't sure if it was going to be 6 issues, 10 issues, and it kept shifting. Initially it was 12, then they said it was going to be 6, and then Grant's like pulling his hair out because he was trying to figure out how he could wrap the story up. He didn't want to leave it hanging. And what it led to in the end was like people just kind of stopped looking at the book a bit, like from an editorial point of view, because they knew it's going to get to this issue. We'll give them 12. When that finishes, we'll be starting them fresh. So we kind of had a bit of freedom.
I was about to say, was that beneficial?
Yeah,
okay.
It was total. And it went, we had room to just really spread our wings a bit. I mean, he practically invented a whole language for some of those issues. It was so clever and poetic and fun and childlike and creative. And when I started painting in the last sort of 5-6 issues, I found my true happy place, in comics. I found a way to do painted comics quickly and efficiently in a way that captures what I could have only dreamt of years and years ago when I was younger.
I definitely want to get you to talk about Starhenge. What you're doing with that reminds me of what I get out of Grant Morrison stuff.
Right.
Which is that like I'm learning all sorts of new things while I'm reading it, but also I'm like, well, that's like a nugget of an idea that like, I'm like, maybe that's going to pay off later, but that's a really interesting visual that you've put in my head, One thing I love about Grant stuff is he does this compressed storytelling. I'm a fan of both, and I know some people like stories that are very long form, and some people like, Grant's all about, he can get, as we mentioned earlier, he can get like an issue worth of content in 2 or 3 pages. Starhenge has got a little bit of that, where there's a lot of content in a small amount of space. But I also I do like the other way too. So I think with like setting up Daryl and Amber, that had to root itself at least at the start to get it going. You had to like these 2 characters, especially when they're coming out of nowhere and you have no idea who they are. And the big Merlin stuff, and you can sell a big sci-fi scene with spaceships and explosions. But then when you're dealing with like 2 ostensibly normal people, you need to have a little bit of heart there. So that I had this one, the 2 ends of the thread, the deep future side and the deep past side, running kind of super fast, super compressed, very Grant Morrison style. Lots and lots of information in a tiny amount of space. Here's the Knights of the Veldt, 1 panel. You've never seen them again. And Daryl ends up being a much, much different character to her. He's got a huge backstory that I'm really looking forward to getting into down the line. Issue 4 was out. He's I'll tell you this much anyway. He's actually one of the earliest shapecocks that was sent back, and he's called Cushion Cell, which I looked up the name, and I was like, what's the most ancient name in history that we know of? And I found like in one of my I say armchair archaeological digs that this name Cushim is the first name that they know of that's been written down of a human of all, full stop. No, see, and I love that because that makes, I see something like that and I go, Wikipedia. Like, you know, like what is that?
Yeah.
That has to be a reference to something.
There's a thought, there's a process, yeah. This book I feel like I could do forever.
I was going to ask you, like, it definitely says book 1.
Yeah.
And is that just sort of like, you know, is it more like, oh, is it like a finite thing, or are you just like, I could just keep doing this forever, so why not?
It started as a 4-book thing. Yeah, I mean, I've got all of time to play with. I've got, you know, all the way from the 5th century all the way to the deep future.
Sure, yeah.
I've got a whole universe to play, and I could definitely. And I hope it sort of gathers enough momentum over time that I can. I mean, I don't like the idea of only doing one book, because I love working with other creators too, and much as I love writing and drawing my own stuff, I definitely don't want to sort of go, I'm never going to do another book with Grant Morrison.
Right, yeah. Right.
Or, you know, there are other writers I'd love to work with. But I do want to keep coming back to Starhenge as much and as often as I can, because I love the characters, and I love the universe, you know? And it gives me so much freedom.
Absolutely.
Right.
Liam, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it.
Pleasure, mate.